Boa tarde, good afternoon. I apologize for my terrible Portuguese, but we're here talking about crypto regulation in Brazil, so I figured I had to try. The story of crypto right now really is about regulation as countries try to grapple with the wake of FTX. Obviously in the United States, where I cover crypto, regulators are clamping down and it seems like pushing countries abroad. But the story in Brazil is very different, where you have the central bank and the securities regulator, the CVM, actually trying to work out a robust regulatory framework. So I'm very excited to hear from my panelists today with a very wide perspective, both on the global scale and here in Brazil, on how the country is taking a unique approach to tackling regulation. I want to start off with Sandra, who does have that global perspective on what really makes Brazil unique on the global stage when it comes to crypto.
Great. Thanks, Leo. Hello, everybody. Thanks for making the time to be out here today. Regulation does seem to be the hot topic, and I will say this. My first visit to Brazil was in 2016 to actually speak at the central bank. And I'd never actually spoken at a central bank event before, on blockchain no less. And I was shocked to know that actually people were already researching cryptocurrencies and blockchain back in 2016. So the brain trust inside of Brazil was already well looking into it from a research perspective. And here we are today. And I think GBBC, for those who are not familiar, is the world's largest and leading blockchain nonprofit foundation association in Switzerland. The Swiss have had regulations for a long time, but what's happening in Brazil is very unique from the sense that you've got now establishing, and I will say ing because it's still going on, establishing of regulations, but you also have regulators and central bankers, bankers in TradFi, as well as the ecosystem here in startup world that actually have been working on different parts of the ecosystem for years and years. This is not something new, and I think that's very powerful.
And Marcelo, I want to turn to you next because you have firsthand experience in how Brazil is really approaching crypto differently than other markets, and especially the United States. And I know you work with ETFs specifically, so it'd be great to get a breakdown from you, what ETFs actually are, and then how Brazil is approaching this differently and what that means for crypto more broadly.
Yeah, so hello everyone, pleasure to be here. And yeah, man, everything we do is around regulation, so we only play the regulated market. We are a crypto-focused asset manager, so basically we are exactly in the middle of this thing that we need to talk with the financial market, traditional financial market, and regulators themselves. So not a lot of people know, but we started in America. Our idea was exactly to provide ways, safe, secure ways, very simple, as any other product in financial markets, to investors to be able to gain exposure to crypto. And we had this idea of ETF. So ETF is nothing else, nothing more than actually a fund that is traded in a stock exchange. So basically you can buy a fund as simple as buying a share of Apple or any other company. So we had this vision, this idea, which was nothing new, but we thought we had an angle. And there is this anecdote that I had this conversation with the former chair of the SEC, Jay Clayton, and it was about a political talk, but we could see in his eyes that this thing would not fly, right? And so I look at my co-founder and say, what do we do? And the idea was, you know what, let's go back home. Let's go back to Brazil because there is demand, there is interest in crypto there. And at this point in time, and this we're talking about 2018, we said, there is intellectually honesty happening in Brazil. So both in the central bank and in the CVM, you had really capable leaders, but that knew nothing about crypto really at that time, or not much, but they were open to have the discussion, to hear about that. So that's what we've done. We came to Brazil and we found that scenario, and literally was mind blowing what happened after. We were able from this country to approve the first crypto ETF in the world, right? And just because we found ways within the current regulation. Changing regulation is very hard. It takes time, but many times you can adapt. And if there is goodwill of regulators because they understand what you're trying to do, and understand the novelty or the innovation, it's like they allow you to do it. And this is what seems to not be happening in US. There is this current against crypto that did not happen in Brazil. So we've done that here, and believe it or not, from Brazil, I think, like we are, Brazil is inspiring in a number of countries to follow that direction.
And then, Jose, I want to turn to you. What does the current state of regulation in Brazil really look like? Can you break down where we're at with the legal situation and then where the different players from the central bank to the CVM are actually situated?
Excellent. So great to be here. So thanks for the invite. I think that the good news is like regulation is happening. Regulation is really happening in Brazil. Last year, at the end of November 2022, we have the law, the 4421 law. It has been approved at the Brazilian Congress. And the good thing is that the law is based on principles. So the legislators, they did not try to regulate the technology, but they are regulating the sector, the segment, especially companies, I would say, involved in negotiations, so exchange like Cointext. So now the law needs to be, we need a presidential decree to make this law a reality, and this presidential decree will indicate the regulator. Most likely will be the Brazilian Central Bank. So the Brazilian Central Bank is already very well prepared, I would say. I've been, a week and a half ago, I was talking with the Brazilian Central Bank. We were invited to present how a crypto exchange works. So how is the operations behind a crypto exchange? So they are very, very open to the dialogue. They really want to build up, because it's new. It's absolutely new for them as well. So they want to build up regulation, like listen to the market and avoiding and to prevent like the innovation. So I think the Brazilian Central Bank will definitely create a state-of-the-art regulation that will, of course, make the crypto segment in Brazil to bring a lot of prosperity to the sector here. You mentioned it also about like the CVM, the Brazilian Security Commission. We cannot forget as well the Federal Tax Authority, which is somehow it regulates the market as well. And that was the first one to regulate back in 2019 in August. They have issued a kind of normatization, a kind of official statement saying that all the players must report in a monthly basis every single transaction, and you must say the amounts, dates, and persons who are involved in those transactions. So that was, I think, a first step, an important step from the Federal Tax Authority, and that's very advanced, I would say, from a tax perspective here. But also, the Brazilian Security Commission is also very open to dialogue. I have to say that the Brazilian Crypto Association is doing an amazing, a great job, like in the interaction with the institution, conversations with the definitions, what's security token, what's non-security token is. So I'm very optimistic about what's coming on in terms of regulation here.
And then looking again back at the global question, I think right now what you're seeing, especially as the US sort of punts the issue of regulation, a lot of countries or regions are trying to step up and attract crypto, become that crypto hub. You have Singapore, you have Hong Kong, UAE, now Brazil. Sandra, I want to ask you if you think that Brazil can really compete with those other countries and regions as we look at what the next big crypto hub is going to be.
The short answer is yeah, yes, absolutely. I think the potential for Brazil, if you asked me 5 years ago, was Brazil's going to be the crypto South American hub. No. I think actually Brazil should be a leading crypto world hub, linking up with other countries around the world. Wow. And we're already seeing that. So what I told a bunch of dowdy American bankers the other day was that, do you notice there are a lot of partnership agreements happening? Turkey just signed one with the UAE. MAS in Singapore has one with Switzerland. Do you notice the US is being left out of a lot of these things? They didn't look at me very favorably when I said that. But anyway, Brazil is continuing to innovate and is signing agreements at the official government level, but also there are many startups and institutions doing cross-collaboration, and I think that will continue. So absolutely.
And then, of course, the flip side of that is you had another country that vied to be a crypto hub, the Bahamas. They attracted a little company called FTX. Some people might have heard of. Didn't work out too well. So I'm curious, for Marcelo and Jose, do you think that Brazil can prevent an FTX type situation from happening, or at least prevent the type of fraud that has plagued crypto for so long?
Yeah, man. Fraud is something very old. Like FTX didn't invent that. But look, maybe, and Brazilians know that, but not a lot of people outside Brazil appreciate that, I guess, in the way it is. But Brazil, risk management-wise, I think is one of the strongest financial systems in the planet. And I mean, the way we're structured, the way it works, I think, very unlikely something like FTX would have happened that way, because you would have caught that in the investor side, not in the user side, but you would have caught that, whenever, the Sequoias, the pension funds were investing in their equity, very unlikely they could get away with this without auditing, without everything. But, my sense is this, whenever you come back to 2022, nobody saw FTX, but that was somewhat expected, every time crypto is super volatile, every time you have these drawdowns, a bunch of people, a bunch of companies are naked, we just didn't know which one would be, right? So, but if you just appreciate that, and nobody, not a lot of people talk a lot about that, but DeFi, oh my God, worked as it was supposed to. The technology delivered in big ways. What happened was literally the good and old fraud, or stuff like Terra Luna that was basically, theses that scaled far more than they should, I guess, that they proved themselves not, to not work. And but look, Brazil as a jurisdiction, as a financial system, is incredibly strong. And in the case that really, we can make this progress, have these advancements through regulation, which something is needed for crypto to flourish, we could really become something, that other jurisdictions, other people from all over the world would potentially land here and start building things. Just as a last point, appreciate the fact that Brazil, for the former internet, not the internet of value, but the internet of information, we are among the top countries in the world for social media, as an example. Adoption here and the way these things are developed here, it really teaches the world in many ways. I think crypto is maybe another level, another layer of abstraction of the internet, and with the right rules, I think we can be a powerhouse. Let's see, but we are on track, I guess.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Marcelo. I think that we have one of the strongest central banks in the world, maybe because of our history in the past, so many economic crises we have been facing, and so the central bank has prepared himself to be very, very strong and conservative in certain ways, that they are very prepared to cross to a crypto regulation. That's my opinion. But fraud is fraud. So I really think that fraud, if someone is with a bad intention to commit fraud, it will commit. But in the conversations with the Brazilian Central Bank, it was very clear about some of the very sensitive areas they were worried about. Custody is something that you need to have some very deep governance in crypto. So they were very prepared to have these discussions, and so we see how they are prepared to do the regulation. And also the segregation of assets, there is something which is assets of the company and separate from the assets of the customers. So something also very important, that if we have a stronger regulation compared to maybe Bahamas or other jurisdictions, and we have experience to do so from our central bank perspective, I would say we would we would avoid certain frauds like that one.
I generally say that Madoff could never have happened in Brazil. Never. There's no chance. Just because the way structure regulations would never allow a structure like that fly in any given moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add one point to this, which is I moved to Washington, D.C. a number of months ago before the whole FTX blow up. That single event has left an indelible mark in D.C. because they were lobbying so hard in D.C. and shook the hands of all of these politicians and legislators and regulators. So what you're seeing in Washington, D.C. right now is a reaction to all of this. And in reality, over time, a lot of this, the temperature will come down and we'll hopefully find more normalized, prudent oversight. But for the moment, what you are seeing is that overreaction. And frankly, the enforcements are going to continue. And I don't think that's going to let up.
That's a great segue to my next question, which is if you do think that balance of power is shifting when it comes to global finance, if it's moving away from the US to places like Brazil or Singapore or Hong Kong, and if that's true, what does that mean? Or if that's not true, what does that mean? Sandra, maybe you want to kick it off?
There's the short term and the long term. Personally, I like to play the long term game, which, then allows you to think many more years into the future. However, yes, so the short-term answer is there is a shift. There are companies who have obviously said out of the US very publicly they're hedging their bets. But here's the reality. If overnight, if your company sitting in Brazil had very unfavorable regulatory environment, would it be that easy for you to shift? When you've got family and friends and your employees and colleagues all have people here, it's from a human perspective, it's very difficult to shift. From an intellectual perspective and economic perspective, it is very easy to shift. So I think there are two dynamics at work here. And so yes, there will be shifting. Yes, you will be getting more going overseas, but I think it takes longer than people think.
I would also add to Sandra, which is I totally agree. I definitely think that that's going to happen, a shift, and probably the tool for this shift is called central bank digital currencies. So I think that's the next step in terms of monetary policy worldwide. This is going to change considerably the way the world is today and the way we are doing cross-border transactions, and that's for sure will open a wide of opportunities worldwide. So I think the shift starts with the CBDC. All the countries are studying and preparing and doing pilots. Brazil is also very well positioned in that perspective, in my opinion. So yeah, and finally, there is one. I really believe. Yesterday I was here in team here in the other stage. I really believe in trust and freedom for the future of economy. And this is decentralized. So I really trust the future is decentralized for economically speaking. And we're going to see a lot of shifts. But I mean, it's still far to know for where we are going to, but it's going to happen.
I'll just add that, blockchain as an architecture, I see that will probably hold, or is going to be under this architecture, probably the biggest or largest systems of humanity in the future. That's pretty philosophical to say, but the truth is, building on what you're saying, decentralization and very clear rules, are a must, or is something that actually US over the last centuries, proposed and proved that to be something superior. Right, and right now, we are so tied to politic views, and this has been proving to be actually no good for society. That my sense that the largest systems that run how we work as a group of people, will probably in the next decades shift to more this digital architecture, and this honestly, will have to do with countries at least in the beginning because that has close ties to values, and value / money is very regulated. But the truth is, we're very angry with the U.S. right now because, in general, right? This is because, it's taking too long to regulate this thing, or pushing back and stuff. But I honestly believe the U.S. is going to come together eventually, guys. Come on. Crypto is not, it's not good or bad. It's a progress. You can try to say that horses are amazing, but eventually cars will catch up, right? So anyways, I trust the U.S. will come together eventually.
Yeah, well, I have one last question building off of that for each of you. And it's something I think about with crypto, and I think is harder to sell in the United States, which is, what is the actual utility of crypto? How are everyday people going to actually use it? And I think reporting in Latin America, you see a lot more use cases for it. So I'm curious from each of you, sort of coming back to that first point, how is crypto different in Brazil? Why is it easier to make a case for why crypto is important here compared to the US or Europe? Marcelo, if you want to kick it off. Yeah.
So look, I think crypto, the first use case, are pretty evident as for now, right? So I think payments, cross-border, remittances, store of value, with Bitcoin, Ethereum is a platform for decentralizing everything. But generally, I say that the coolest use cases have not been invented yet. And the truth is because we're still in the infrastructure phase. AI is a great example. We have been talking about AI for 20 years now. And 2 months ago, the world changed, right? So OpenAI presented ChatGPT, and oh my God, crypto will leave a number of these aha moments in the future. And I say that the most consequential use cases are not here yet. But the ones we have are big enough for now, I guess, already. I don't know if you agree, but...
I think one of the most amazing things about Brazil, and it may not be amazing to you, but it is to me, is that crypto has been looked at in a intellectually honest way, meaning there's no political charge to it. There hasn't been, at least that I've seen. There's no weird prepositions about we must only have this type of currency or data value of payment. This is the only way it can be. And so that open-mindedness has allowed for crypto to actually get rooted and become normalized. If you want to use it, use it. If it's not useful to you, then don't use it. But you have to have choice. You should have freedom in what you can choose. And in certain jurisdictions, I hate to say it, but they're not even allowing for you to have that choice in a safe, with regulatory guardrails kind of way. And that, to me, is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
And just to conclude, in Brazil we have Pix, which is an incredible instant payment solution. So I'm not that optimistic for crypto, for micropayments, at least in the short, middle term. But I definitely believe that in crypto for reserve of value, cross-border transactions for sure, and of course, programmable protocol. So that's what I believe for the short mid-term, that's gonna be very huge advances, especially in Brazil.
Well, thank you so much for the fascinating perspective. It was great chatting with you all.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you for joining for the talk.
Thank you.
All right.